apple season, and what better to make than an apple tart? This isn't just any apple tart. La Tarte de Demoiselle Tatin. It's an upside down apple tart. You're gonna love making this dish. Before you make this dessert, it's best to think ahead. You'll need to make your own pie crust. You're welcome to go to the store and purchase your own, but this dish's flavor is absolutely best with a pâte brisée, an easy recipe that you can create your own pie crust. You'll let it sit in the fridge for about an hour and it'll be ready to use. Let's start with our very first ingredient and most important, our apples in any variety that you would like. I have 3 different here. We'll slice them very thin if you are using a knife. Otherwise, you can use a mandolin slicer, but be careful. They tend to be dangerous, so be very slow and use the guard when possible. I've decided to use a springform pan for this dish. Most recipes like this call for something with a much more solid base. I've chosen the springform because it allows the air and the moisture to evaporate from the bottom of the pan. At the same time, you'll also lose some butter, sugar, and moisture from the apples, so make sure that you have a baking sheet underneath your pan to capture all of those juices. Let's prepare our springform pan with 1 tablespoon of butter. We'll line the bottom very thoroughly as well as halfway up the sides. Next, we'll add 2 to 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, coating the bottom of the pan thoroughly, and then we'll shake the sugar around to make sure that it is completely coated along the bottom and the sides. Next, we will lay out our apples. When you flip this dessert, this is the layer that you will be seeing on the very top. So you want to make sure that your layering is nice and tight, as uniform as possible, so you really have a nice finish for your dessert. Now here comes the flavor enhancers. I have 1 stick of butter, unsalted and melted, and we'll pour this as evenly as you can over your apples. Next, I have a half a cup of granulated sugar, again evenly spread throughout the top of your apples. You can also go in between your layers if you'd like, but on the top is just fine. A light sprinkle of cardamom, and another light sprinkle of cinnamon. If you'd like quantities, probably 1/4 teaspoon of each. Now, our pâte brisée, or our pie crust, we're going to lay out a piece of parchment paper, put a little bit of flour, and put our pie dough on the top. With a rolling pin, flour liberally and roll out your dough so that it creates a circle. Now very carefully we will take our pie crust and flip it over the top of our springform pan and carefully remove the parchment paper. My pâte brisée recipe tends to be very buttery and delicate, so as you see here, there are some cracks that are forming. That's okay, we'll actually push some of these pieces together and use a knife to slice around some excess dough and make sure that everything is in place and uniform. Finally, we'll take the tip of a sharp knife and create a few air pockets. We do have the air coming from the bottom of the dish, but it's also good to have some ventilation for the top as well. Our tart is ready to go in the oven, so we'll quickly put this on top of a baking sheet and pop it into our 375 preheated degree oven and cook for 45 minutes or until the crust begins to brown. There's this unbelievable smell in the house right now. This tart smells incredible. I'm going to take a sharp knife and run it around the edges to make sure I remove any stickiness and carefully remove the springform portion of this pan. Now take a flat serving plate or a cake circle if you have one and flip your tart onto the serving plate. With that same trusty sharp knife, carefully remove the bottom layer of that springform pan, making sure no apples are stuck to it. And if you put enough butter at the bottom like I did, you won't have a problem. Look at this tart, nice and thin, the apples are perfectly cooked, and a very, very delicious dessert, perfect with a side of ice cream. Just in time for fall, this dessert is just the right amount of sweet, and I hope you use those freshly picked apples to make it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll subscribe for future recipes and kitchen tips. In the meantime, à votre santé.